Hi, and welcome to the 12th episode of our WVD Community Podcast. My name is Stefan Dingemanse, and I will be hosting this episode together with Neil McLaughlin and Patrick Kuhler. Hi guys, how are you?
Hi Stefan.
Hello.
All good, thank you.
Okay.
Are you ready to introduce our next guest for today's episode? His name is Vadim Vladimirskiy, and he is the CEO of the company Nerdio. Hi Vadim, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you guys? Hi, Stefan. Hi, Neil. Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you in our show. So, I think the most people will know the company Nerdio, but for the people who don't know Nerdio or can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Vadim. I am the founder of Nerdio. We started the company back in 2016. And to give you a bit of a kind of a history of how the company came about, so I started personally in desktop virtualization in 2000, I believe, when it was still Windows NT Terminal Server Edition with Citrix, and have really been involved with desktop virtualization ever since. For the first few years after being introduced to virtual desktops, I was working as a consultant and did a few Citrix implementations. And then in 2005, I actually launched an MSP, a managed services provider company that was focused on using desktop virtualization. And the term didn't really exist back then, but using remote desktop solutions or terminal server at that time, obviously, to service small and mid-sized businesses in the Chicagoland area, which is where I live. So spent a few years building that business and eventually got into VDI, got into VMware Horizon, and other such technologies. And after about 10 years of doing that, we realized that other MSPs that wanted to build a similar cloud practice with virtual desktops may benefit from some of the technology we developed to use in-house. So Nerdio was born in 2016 as an automation platform for other MSPs to deploy actual VMware Horizon-based virtual desktops on a private cloud that my MSP was running at the time. And as we started working with more and more partners, the feedback we got is like, hey, this is great, it's easy to use, it's simple, it does what we need, but we don't want to put customers in your cloud, we want them to be in Azure. So can you create an Azure version of this automation? And Nerdio for Azure was sort of our first public cloud product that was born around 2017 or so. And that focused on taking RDS and just building an entire RDS deployment from the ground up completely automatically across multiple customers for managed service providers. So that was our first product. And at the same time, we started working with the WVD team at Microsoft on the limited preview that they had, the private preview that was going on. And by the time WVD launched, we released the capability of not only doing an RDS deployment in Azure, but also doing WVD deployment in Azure. And very soon thereafter, we got a lot of enterprise customers started coming to us and said, we really love what you're doing. Can we use your product to do our own internal deployments? And we kind of explored that capability, and we decided that because our product was really built for MSPs and it was kind of a multi-tenant management platform, it didn't work so well for enterprises that really had very stringent security, data residency requirements, all of those kinds of things. So instead of trying to rework our existing product, Nerdio for Azure, we said, okay, we're going to build something brand new that's going to be purely WVD focused with no RDS capabilities, and it's going to be targeted to the enterprise. And we launched the product, which was called Nerdio Manager for WVD, that some of you listeners may be familiar with. And we launched that product earlier this year in March, the week before the whole COVID situation went down. And as I'm sure everyone here and everyone listening can realize, we've been super busy, just day and night all over the world, helping people get up and running with WVD using the Nerdio Manager. So kind of in a nutshell, that's how the company came to be, and that's kind of how our products came to the world.
Nice, great.
That's pretty awesome. So essentially, you proceeded from market demand, right? Because obviously you've had a product, and obviously yourselves, you obviously didn't see what was coming. Obviously you knew WD was going to be popular, right? But I don't think any of us knew exactly how popular WD was going to become. So how have you managed to keep up the pace? Because one thing which constantly shocks and amazes me is the pace of change that comes from Nerdio. Obviously, you've got probably sometimes releases twice a month, at least once a month, right?
Certainly, yeah.
How do you manage to keep up with that on such a?
It's not easy. It's not easy. We definitely make it a priority to kind of continually innovate. I personally, I'm the CEO, but I'm very close to the product. I'm the one to sort of initially kind of envisioned it and had to pitch our board that, hey, we got to do this instead of refactoring what we have. Let's bring something new to market. That's obviously a big undertaking. So, I'm personally very involved, and I'm also very close to the customers and the partners we work with. So like I try to do as many hands-on deployments with customers as I can to see like how are they using it, what is the next thing, that next feature that they need. So we get a tremendous amount of feedback, both when we are involved with deployments, from the partners that we work with who use our product, and also from customers. Even when they come to us for support, we get just an avalanche of feature requests. And then we try to decide, okay, what's the most important? Which one have we heard multiple times? And we try to get them released like literally within a month or so, right? Our goal is to go from, hey, somebody brought up an idea and let's get it released in a release or two. So they can actually see like my feedback was implemented, in a very short order. So when we first launched the product, we were literally doing a release every 2 weeks. There was just a lot to build. And I think now we've sort of settled more into kind of a once a month cadence. And as a matter of fact, I watch you guys and I listen to you guys on a pretty regular basis. I, anxiously await the weekly edition of the newsletter and everything. And a lot of the feature ideas are sort of either reinforced or sometimes they come from the information that you collate together and you provide to the community. So again, very thankful to what you do and what other people who participate in the WVD community in general put out there. That's where a lot of our functionality and ideas come from. So that's kind of how we do it. We have a public preview that actually just launched earlier this week for a new release, and then usually within a week or two, it's going to go into kind of GA status. Once we have a few hundred of these deployments that get upgraded, we'll see how it goes, and then we move it into GA from that point.
So talking about the product, how many developers are working for Nerdio?
We have a few dozen. They're all over the world. We have different teams working in different products. We can have dedicated teams on a per product basis, as you would imagine, even though we're a fairly small startup company. And our developers are amazing. I think they're probably the best I've worked with in my career. They really understand the space very well. They understand how all of this works, how Azure works, right? I mean, it's not just WVD, but we see our job is taking the sort of the world of Azure services and trying to figure out which of these services can enable a virtual desktop administrator to do something that they would otherwise have to do manually, and maybe they don't even realize they can do such a thing. Right? How do we? So it's not just looking at what the WVD team is building, but it's looking at everything Azure and figuring out what's applicable and what are we going to leverage for the Nerdio manager.
Perfect. Vadim, we saw as well that you have launched or you are participating in a lot of videos when it comes to the Nerdio Academy, for example. That means, and we have the feeling that you have a very, very technical knowledge as well. So you're not only business related when it comes or when you're speaking about Nerdio, about Azure, etc. Can you explain us a little bit more? Are you developing by yourself as well?
So I don't develop by myself. That part of my career ended a couple of decades ago. I spent a few years, I think maybe in college or so, working for a little software startup where I did a little development. I wrote code in Perl back then, and that was about it. Then I got into IT and desktop virtualization. But I am technical. The name Nerdio is appropriately so, right? I look at myself as a nerd, and I'm kind of a techie. I like all of this stuff, but I also very much like to see how all of this technology really applies to business. And I spent, most of my career really building business models around desktop virtualization, and not only doing deployments for customers, but trying to figure out how to optimize it from a cost perspective, from a kind of a business model, billing perspective. We have a lot of innovations in Nerdio around how we go to market and how we make the product available, literally across the world, and distribution relationships. So I like both sides. And in my role, I'm very fortunate that I'm able to really get to do both. With Nerdio Manager, which launched in March, and we've been super busy trying to help a lot of customers. I've been spending a disproportionate amount of my time on the technology side. So I don't do any development, but I definitely do a lot of, I guess, the product marketing side of things, right? So all of the technical, I envision a lot of the features. I work with the developers to help define them and spec them out, and sort of I help guide that effort, along with with our product managers and everyone else who's involved. And then because we innovate at such a high pace and we release so many features, we struggle sometimes to keep up just building documentation. As you can imagine, for every feature we build, there is documentation that has to be written, and things change very quickly in Azure and in Wvd, and having to update documentation is a lot of effort. And like I said, we're a startup, we're a fairly small company. So the mode that we've settled on was sort of this demo of the day video, which is really quick and easy to produce. It's not super professional, not professional at all, but it gets the information out there, and I see a lot of people consuming it. So, I'll get a customer who says, hey, look, I've watched all of your 100 videos that you've done over the last few months. I'm like, wow, like, where did you find all this time to actually watch it? But I try to make them really short, as short as I can, like 2 to 10 minutes at most. And every feature that we release, I generally have a little video to go along with it. So somebody can just read about it, then click a link and watch a YouTube video to actually see it in action. And that seems to be working pretty well.
It's awesome, because I know most CEOs who you meet, even in technology companies, they may not have a clue about the actual technology itself. Obviously, they just look at business plans and market projections and figures and numbers and stuff, right? So to have a sort of CEO who gets involved in such depth that you do on the technology side, that's pretty impressive. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it helps us to move fast as well. If I had to then go to somebody to make a decision, right, it obviously would slow things down. But if I'm the guy helping a customer do a deployment and sort of, okay, take a mental note, they said something or they were confused by something, and then I see that coming in as a support ticket that comes across my desk, and then I'm talking to the developers, like within a matter of days, we can have an issue solved for a customer in the product rather than going through a very long cycle. So that's what kind of help us stay really nimble and keep innovating quickly.
Yeah, for me, one of the reason why Wvd has been so successful is, I think the Microsoft Global Black Belts have played a major role in that customer feedback, right? So a lot of the stuff that you see implemented in Wvd from Microsoft is from customer feedback, which is obviously not the Microsoft that we're used to. But when you couple that with stuff that you're doing as well, I think this is why we've got such an amazing solution out there today, right? If you go back 2 years ago, who would have envisioned what we've got today? It's pretty amazing.
For sure. I mean, I think because most of my career I spent thinking about desktop virtualization sort of as a business model, I kind of saw this coming. I wrote about it and blogged about it for many years. I always saw that, desktop virtualization is ultimately about Windows, right? Yes, there's Linux versions of it and everything, but it's a Windows way. It's a way to deliver Windows, from the cloud or virtually, obviously. And until Microsoft really stepped into that space in a serious way, we've seen what happened for a couple of decades. It was sort of, is this the year of the VDI? Is that the year of the VDI? We kept asking
We
that
heard it
question
every year.
for many years, but it never happened. A lot of companies build very successful businesses, right? I mean, there's obviously Citrix, there's VMware, there's a lot of service providers that made a very good living off of doing desktop virtualization, but it wasn't mass market adoption. It was a niche kind of a product. And from very early days, literally in 2006 and 2007, which is when I started really seeing desktop virtualization as the new way of delivering IT, at least to the small business at the time. So small and mid-sized business was our target market. And back then, when the only technology was Windows Server 2003 or 2000, but really 2003 is when we started terminal services. And for those of you who remember, that wasn't quite so robust. But that was the way we envisioned, like, this is the way the world is going to be at some point. There's really no reason for a physical device in many situations. And we built a business, a big successful business, which we were able to sell recently. But it wasn't world domination kind of a thing, right? You didn't have a mass market adoption of that technology. And when Microsoft started really putting their hat into the ring, so to speak, with WVD, I think it changed everything. Obviously, COVID accelerated things, but it's sort of the world that I envisioned, 10 years ago is sort of coming to fruition, and I'm very excited about it, and just being able to participate in it and see it come about in the early stages is really exciting for me.
Perfect. Maybe I have another question for you, Vadim. While talking
Please.
about the features of the Nerdio Manager for WVD, it's very impressive to see. The manager can do stuff or has features that Microsoft is not able to deliver right now, not yet. Something like the auto-scaling capabilities and what you can do with the built-in FS Logics profile management, for example. A personal question of mine, first of all, what's your favorite feature when you think of the product?
What's my favorite feature? Well, I've spent so much time on AppAttach over the last 2 weeks that I don't know, maybe just by investing so much time into it, maybe it's becoming my favorite. But I would say auto scaling is definitely one of the top three. We spend a lot of time and a lot of thought went into how to do auto scaling, whether to use scale sets, not to use scale sets, different algorithms, different triggers, the auto heal functionality. We kind of had the basics built out when the product launched, and then we got so much feedback from customers. They said, well, it would be great if I could have this many VMs on during this time and that many VMs on during that time, and then if CPU goes up, then I can add. So we got a lot of ideas. We didn't implement them all yet, at least. But auto scaling is definitely very sophisticated, and I think easy to use for the most part. Most customers, once they see how to set up a dynamic host pool once, they kind of get it, and I think it's pretty easy for them to manage. And I think most of them are kind of surprised at how hands-off it is, right? You set it up. They say, well, how do I know how to size it? How big do I make it? I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. Set your burst capacity to more VMs than you think you'll need, and let the system tell you. If you don't need that capacity, it won't scale into it, right? It won't build those new VMs for you. And if it does, then either you've underestimated how many users per core you're able to fit, or you have more users on the system. So I like auto scaling a lot. I'm getting pretty excited about AppAttach now that we've launched it, and I'm seeing customers using it. So I think that's also pretty exciting.
So have you had much? I mean, obviously, I've been wanting to use AppAttach in an environment for a while, but most customers I've come across won't want to use it because obviously it's still in preview mode, and it has been for a while now. Do you have many production users using it out there? Interesting.
we get almost every customer conversation we have is, when are you going to have app attach? When are we going to have app attach, right? I mean, we all know realistically, getting their entire environment an app attach is not something that's going to happen anytime soon. But I think it's built up as such an exciting way of doing application management that I think a lot of people want to get their hands on it. So when we launched our current version, which came out over the weekend of version 2.4, so we now have app attach capability where you can take a VHDX or VHDX package of an expanded MSIX, and you can just completely automatically in the Nerdio Manager get it uploaded as an application into an Azure file share that's AD joined. And then you can assign users to it. And then you can assign it to a host pool. And then you can assign users or groups. And then as the users log in, if they're logging into a host pool and they happen to be assigned to both the host pool and the app, it just appears, right? So they don't have to do any staging, destaging, registering, unregistering. They don't have to install SSL certs if they use self-signed certs to create the app. Like, all of that is completely automated. And whenever customers see that, especially once they can go through the process once, they're like, oh my gosh, like, I can just assign a user to an app from a web UI with one click. The user logs off and logs back on, and the app is there.
So basically, you did what Microsoft didn't have at this point: the integration of app attach. You don't need to run any staging or mounting scripts to get the application being attached. It's just there with the Nerdio management.
It handles everything for you. There is zero PowerShell required. You know, the one thing you need is to have the package, right? You have to, we don't yet have a way for you to create a package. You need to bring a package with you. And we actually packaged a bunch of applications, you know, Chrome, Firefox, Notepad++, Teams, a few of things like that. And we put up on, you know, on our website for people to start playing with the common applications just to see how it works. So as long as you have that application, there is zero PowerShell that you need in order to make it available to your users.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's pretty exciting. Say that again.
We're getting closer to that Nirvana solution, aren't we? When I fell in love with WVD, I think it's when Jim Moyle described the whole vision of what WVD is going to be, where everything's decoupled from stuff. So your applications are separate, your operating system is separate, your profiles are separate. So it just makes that whole management of the environment so much easier.
For sure.
Because when I speak to customers, the biggest challenge normally is how do we do image management? It's the same as it's always been with VDI. Image management has always been the hardest thing to do. I think app attach is just going to massively be a huge game changer for that, because it takes away that image management. I know, as you said, you'll never get there 100% of applications, but if you can get 80 to 90% of the applications away from the image, that's just a game changer, in my opinion.
Right. And like you said, you know, I think it's not unreasonable. Kind of the world is in sight of having a marketplace image of Windows 10 multi-session, having a, you know, that FS Logix profile that's already obviously available, but like not even having to create a custom image, never have to package it again, and just plug applications into it at runtime and make that available. I think that's the ultimate. That's going to be the ultimate scenario. I think there's lots of very interesting companies out there that are helping with MSIX packaging and creation, you know, conversion from MSI or from other legacy formats, FB, etc. So I think as there is more and more adoption of the MSIX format by vendors, and then more and more tools that can easily convert them to a VHD format, I think it's going to accelerate very quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah, because I come from a large enterprise background, and so I'm used to being on projects where there's like thousands of applications and it's going to take you 2 years to migrate from one environment to the other. And I was just thinking about this the other day. It's like when you mentioned all the third-party tools, there's companies out there now who will do all the MSCX packaging for you. And they can literally, I did a user group with a company called Rhino Free, and they were basically saying, yeah, we can spit all your applications into our system, and then we'll detect merchant problems for you, and out comes an MSX attached product. And it's kind of like, well, imagine if you've got 500 applications where I can say, take my 500 applications, convert them into MSAX, stick them on a file share, use Nerdio or a other product to attach them to users. You just basically done probably 2 years worth of work in old world in a matter of days or weeks. And
amazing.
That's the world that we're living in today, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. No, lots of exciting stuff happening there with applications. I listened to one of your prior webcasts or webinars with Stefan about what Microsoft is building, which is also very exciting. In the portal, the integration with App Attach. So that's sort of similar to the concept that we have. And the nice thing, we've been able to do it without any direct access to the VMs, meaning like we don't log into the VMs. We don't have network access to the session hosts. So we've been able to really automate all of that through kind of Azure WVD APIs to be able to get that app attach integration to happen at the operating system level, which I'm pretty happy about because, we work with some very, very large customers, a lot of government organizations, and that access and security is very, very key. So we try to keep our tools very light in terms of what access they need. It's very kind of limited. It's API only, and it was a nice engineering challenge to get that done without needing access to the VM itself.
Cool. Have you seen the Ignite announcements? Literally, they announced just before we came on this podcast. Have you seen them?
Like an hour ago.
Which one are you talking about?
So Microsoft announced the MSAX stuff by the portal officially.
So basically, Microsoft has just announced the MSIX app attach integration into the Azure portal. And it will become available, I think, in public preview at the end of this year.
Right.
Natively in the portal.
Yep. I think we all knew that was coming. Obviously that's a great thing for the ecosystem, and people will have options. They can do it natively. They can do it through Nerdio. We'll obviously add some value-added functionality into it as time goes on. So that's great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I also have another question for you, Vadim. It's about the Nerdio manager itself and which company size should use it. Because I often receive the question also from my customers, for which customer size or which company size is Nerdio manager for WVD originally developed? Do you have something size or recommendation?
Sure. So we typically say that a company with, let's say, 167 users, to be precise, is kind of our threshold, or larger is the type of company that is generally attracted to the Nerdio manager. Again, we have another product called Nerdio for Azure, which also has WVD capabilities. It's designed more for service providers with smaller companies, smaller customers. And the companies that we have using our product really range. I would say the smallest ones are a few dozen, even though it's smaller than what we originally envisioned, and then the larger ones have over 100,000. We have some with multiple millions of objects in Azure Active Directory, and that's its own engineering challenge. They try to make sure that you can properly assign users and groups in a directory of that size. So we really have a very wide range of customers. But initially, we envisioned it for larger organizations with at least hundreds of users, if not thousands or tens of thousands of users. But we are seeing a ton of demand from across the spectrum, especially with a lot of our partners. We work with a lot of partners all over the world because we're a US-based company. We have some presence in the EMEA and in other places, but mostly we're US-based. So when companies need help around the world, we have a lot of partners both in US and abroad that help us with the deployment and the support of the product, and they tend to have a wide range and a lot of times smaller customers. So we do see those as well. I don't know if that answers your questions, but initially it was envisioned for 100 plus, but we do have customers that are using it who are smaller as well.
Yeah, perfect. Because I wanted to address another thing, because we heard from the Insider program you have started, the community program, that there will be a community edition of the Nerdio Manager for WVD. Is that something for smaller organizations?
It will be. So the community edition will be something that's available for smaller deployments. I forget what exactly the threshold is going to be, but it will be for smaller deployments. And I don't want to steal Boss's thunder on this, so I'm going to let him talk about the details. And I honestly don't know the exact specifics, but I know it's coming very soon. I know it's currently being worked on, and we're very excited to launch it because it just gives more people the chance to deploy WVD and manage it without having to learn a lot of the technical nuances behind it.
Exactly. And I think it will help you as well to get even more feedback from smaller clients, or even those who have just an MSDM subscription from their employers, for example. They just want to quickly deploy it to see the capabilities, to get a certain interest, and maybe to see bugs, to report them to you finally. So it gives you a lot of opportunities here.
Yeah, we hope so. We hope, kind of to give back to the community. And, if people then have projects, if they like the product, they worked with it in their own lab, and then they have a project with a customer and they're already familiar with the product, obviously, we hope that they would work with us in getting that deployment done.
I have to say, you are keeping Baz very busy, because every day I think something pop up on Twitter about he signed up a new partner. So
yeah, he likes to be busy, and yes, we definitely we like to stay busy too. So yes, we're keeping him busy.
It's a new feature or a new partner.
Yeah, we're actually like this release that came out, has X number of features. I forget what it is, 12 or 13 or something like that, and each one is sort of broken up into an announcement and a little video that's going to go with it. And I think the problem is we're going to kind of run out of time before the next release comes. So it's a good problem to have, but it's
So what's the future for Nerdio then? What's your sort of long-term vision plan?
I think we kind of have two missions in life at Nerdio. Number one is we're out there empowering MSPs in their quest to build successful Azure practices. Having come from an MSP, built one from the ground up, having sold it, I'm sort of very familiar with that world, very familiar with the customers, the business model. And, kind of our original mission with Nerdio was to help as many MSPs as we can around the world build a cloud practice. Because, to us, the word, Azure and everything about Azure is kind of an obvious thing. We work with it every day. We all know it. We know it exists. But you'll be surprised how little penetration there is of Azure in the SMB and the MSP community that serves the SMBs. And I think Nerdio has a lot to offer, both in terms of knowledge, which is why you mentioned, Patrick, like our Nerdio Academy. A lot of the content there, it's not just technical content, it's about the business of an MSP who's in the cloud, and also the technology to enable it. So with MSPs, we don't not just help them deploy and manage those environments, but we help them price it and package it, and we have tools to really help them go to market and build a successful cloud practice. So that's kind of one of our missions. Our second mission with the Nerdio Manager product is to empower IT professionals who want to adopt and use WVD at scale, do so in a very sort of seamless and automated way. So, those are sort of the two things we're trying to achieve with MSPs: empower them to build a business on Azure, and with the enterprise customers, help them build and maintain a large WVD environment in an easy way.
Nice, impressive.
So, what we really hope, kind of from a vision perspective, is, any WVD deployment that's being considered, Nerdio is part of the equation in one way or the other. Whether it's a deployment in SMB and there's a managed services provider who's involved in doing it, or if it's an enterprise doing a WVD deployment, that Nerdio adds so much value that it just makes sense to include that as part of that deployment, to make the deployment go better, to make the management easier, to save costs with auto scaling. Those are usually very significant things. To monitor things, we have a lot of monitoring capabilities. I know you had Marcel on your show a few weeks ago, and talk about the Sapago monitor. So we leverage a lot of the data that his technology provides, and build on top of it a lot of analytics that customers find very useful with WVD. So that's what we are working towards.
Yeah, I think keeping it simple is key. Obviously, for people who know about WVD, it's simple for them. But especially if you, for example, got no background in VDI and you want to do WVD, I can imagine from a customer or even from an MSP point of view, it's massively complicated. Because you have to think about all these stuff where a physical deployment you wouldn't even think about. So I think any products like yourself that's out there, which can help people, literally just a few clicks of the button and off you go.
For sure.
With all the best practice, I think a lot of people forget about the best practice stuff. So anyone now, because it's native within the Azure portal, anyone can go up and spin up a few VMs. I'm sure there's plenty of stories out there in the wild where people have gone on and deployed thousands of VMs. Next, done.
And then got their Azure bill.
Exactly, and then got their Azure bill. And so, sort of product like yours, where it makes it literally out of the box, it's optimized, right? So I can imagine, even though you do have to shell out a little bit more money, because obviously, because you pay per user, right? Or is it per device?
So we have two billing models, and you can choose which one you want to be on, directly from the product, and you can change it at any time. It's always consumption. So let's say in a month, we look at prior month's usage, and then we bill either on named users, which means users who've been assigned to a host pool, or concurrent users, which is obviously the maximum number of users that have logged in at the same time. So it's unique users in either case. Okay. So those are our two billing models. And speaking of costs, I mean, yes, there is cost to the license. Obviously, we got to pay the bills as well. So yes, it's not free software. But what I'm very pleased about is, and I don't know how you or your listeners are familiar with the product, but a couple of months ago, maybe a month and a half ago, we released some of our savings and cost projection information inside the product. So basically, when you go in, you can see your monthly savings on a per host pool basis, as well as your projected per user costs based on like historical data. And all of that gets rolled up to a workspace level. So you can see that both at the host pool level and at the workspace level. And what we're finding is that for almost every deployment that we have, for a customer that leverages dynamic host pools, which almost all of them do, they more than pay for multiple times usually for the cost of the Nerdio license with the auto scale efficiency that it drives, right? So that's kind of great. It's nice to be able to add all this other value and say, not only are you going to get all this value, but it's actually going to also net save you money based on what you're doing right now. Because most people, as you know, and I know, Patrick, you have some other scaling technology out there as well, but most people will deploy and they just won't touch it. They'll just let it run and they'll think it's okay. And then we'll go in there and we'll say, okay, well, let's convert it to dynamic. Let's put in a very non-aggressive scaling algorithm first, and then see what happens. And then they're like, oh, wow, 50% savings. I'm saving thousands of dollars a month just by doing very basic non-aggressive auto scaling. And then you can get even more aggressive. You can say, if there is a user that left their session disconnected, log them off. and then scale that machine in, and then it goes into 60%, 70%, and we're seeing savings that are in that range. And it's great to be able to have a product that saves money and adds a lot of value in being able to simplify the deployment and management.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. It's very impressive. So you just said you started with WVD Manager in March. It has been released in March, like a half year ago.
Half a year ago, March 10th. March 10th was our public preview. So not only did it launch in March, so we had private preview that launched in February. We launched public preview March 10th. We had a few customers on it already. And then, COVID happened either that week or the week after. Everything, at least in the US, started to get locked down. And it was literally, 20-hour days, 18-hour days. It was, I would start my morning. I would start my, start my morning with my, customers in India. Then it would go to Europe. Then it would go to US. Then it would be Australia. And then next morning, get a few hours of sleep and then start all over again. I think we've had, by now, in the last 6 months, probably 1,000 customers deploying the product. And you can imagine that's a lot, right? It's a lot of customers that have done WVD deployments with that technology, just in the Nerdio Manager side, and probably just as many, if not more, SMBs that have used our Nerdio for Azure product. So it was quite intense. March, April, May, there was not a lot of sleep going on. And we're not a services company, and we really don't strive to be one. So in the early days when we launched the product, we didn't have a lot of partners that were doing it. So when Microsoft would say, well, we have a customer who's asking about Nerdio, and they want help deploying it, like it would be us doing it. So I would be one of the people doing it, and a bunch of our other engineers, they would literally be just sitting there doing deployments. Luckily, we got it down to 2 hours. We can have somebody from zero to a completely configured environment where they can just start installing applications on the images we already set up for them within 120 minutes. So that let us do multiple deployments a day. And it was just nonstop. It slowed down. It slowed down, thankfully. And we also got a lot of partners. So I think in the last 6 months, we're fortunate enough to be working with maybe 30 to 50 different end user computing partners around the world who are using Nerdio Manager as kind of their standard way of deploying WVD. And now they're trained up, they can do these. So we just see these popping up. People are doing deployments and we don't even get involved, which is really our business model, right? We're a software company. We don't want to really necessarily be doing services unless we have to be.
Wow, impressive. Very impressive. Cool.
Yeah, it seems that a lot of successful WVD projects started in March, right? The WVD community, the Nerdio Manager for WVD.
I think everybody in the space really saw a nice uptick. And, it's good because it's growing the pie, right? It's not really so much shifting of share between different platforms or different scenarios. It's usually kind of net new implementations. People that haven't considered desktop virtualization in the past are now doing it. So I think a larger and larger percentage of the Windows desktop market will hopefully start going towards desktop virtualization, and over time that will grow and obviously benefits the entire ecosystem, the Nerdio and all the other partners, and obviously Microsoft from an Azure compute and storage consumption perspective. So lots of exciting growth to be had now that it's sort of gotten kick-started with the new demand.
Yeah, I noticed Citrix just renamed their product last week to Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops to Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops on Azure. So I think that's quite a big statement, isn't it? To basically say, we're going cloud only.
All in. They're all in.
All in. So I expect others will follow. Do you expect this growth to continue? I mean, because I can't remember, I think I saw an article from Mary Jo Foley a few weeks ago, or a few months ago actually, where they were basically saying Microsoft were thinking about sort of taking the WVD technology into their consumer space, as in like having a Windows desktop OS as a service kind of thing, where essentially a thin client for home users, right? Do you ever envisage that? What do you see that much?
I've seen that article. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting concept, right? I obviously don't know much more than what's out there, but it's an interesting concept, and I think that has the opportunity, if they do go that route, which it sounds based on the article that they are. I think that will just grow the pie even further, right?
Yeah.
It's going to have more and more desktop virtualization out there as a legitimate way of delivering IT. It's a little ironic. I remember in the early days of being the MSP and putting all of our customers in desktop virtualization. I remember when we called a software vendor for support. One of the things we always told our techs is, don't say you're running in a virtual desktop environment, right? Because what are you gonna get? Oh, it's not supported, right? So like you don't mention it. Why? Because like nobody was doing it. The vendors didn't know anything about it. They never certified their products on virtualization, and I think all of that sort of kept the growth of the industry kind of tapered down as a result. So I think now, going into a vendor and saying like, hey, this is WVD. They're like, what's WVD? I'm like, well, go figure it out. It's not my job to educate you on it. In the past, it used to not be like that. You had to, not reveal that information out of fear of not getting support for their product.
I still see that today, though. To be honest with you,
it's probably good practice to have.
Yeah.
I a lot of times I tell vendors, hey, it's RDS. Just RDS, can you make it? Does it work in RDS? Yes. Okay, then this is just RDS.
Yeah, the problem I've come across in a few deployments is, obviously the vendors have cottoned on to this whole RDS thing, and they have like RDS versions for their products, or terminal service versions, or some of them are sort of built it into the actual installers. So I've had it a few times with a few applications where you try to install it, and it's expecting a terminal services to be running, so you have to sort of force it to install. So
right.
And I think that it's the installer is still seeing it as a server OS.
Yep.
The Windows 10
product type 3.
Yeah.
I think we're certainly in for an interesting few years. It's
they'll have to adapt. I think software publishers are going to have to do MSIX for their installers. Once they're thinking MSIX, then the whole virtualization sort of becomes a byproduct, right? Once you're MSIX kind of standards compliant, everything else is sort of easy. But now they're going to be forced to change. I think the bigger the market grows, the more power there is, and the more consumer buying power there is to push them to get their products to be compatible with desktop virtualization, and it's just a snowball effect. I hope, right? I hope is gonna keep the momentum, even as COVID hopefully wanes soon, and people start getting back into the offices. And I think that initial spike is likely to pull back a little bit, right? I think there's going to be fewer active users just by the virtue of being able to work from their office on physical machines. I think many businesses, not only will they be thinking about the remote work as a long-term strategy, but I think they've also now experienced the power of centralization and consolidation and kind of centralized management of images and apps and all of the benefits of desktop virtualization. So even if the demand sort of goes back to what it was before, you have a lot more IT professionals out there who are aware and have seen it firsthand. And I believe they're going to kind of see the opportunity in going in that direction, even if the demand for it may be the same as it was in the past. I don't know if you guys agree. Do you think that's a valid assessment?
Definitely. I definitely don't know about you guys, but I think once IT professionals see it for the first time, how simple, quickly, and easy it is to deploy, they realize that the power. And it's like I'm working on a project at the moment where there's a company, typical company, 5-year-old hardware, aging physical data center. They don't have any cloud capability at all. I deployed one host pool for them and showed the IT guy how to do it. Came in on the Monday morning, and they'd literally created 4 different host pools. He'd done his own image and he'd done that. And he's like, he turned around and said, look, if I'd have done this in a physical environment, it would have taken me months. It's taken me days to do this. And I think the more IT professionals who see that and realise that, I think the more I'm hoping virtualization will grow.
Yep,
for sure. And there's just also so much gravity, there's the concept of data gravity. I think there's also a lot of gravity around the desktop. Once you have the desktop in Azure, if it's not the last thing to go, if it happens to be the first thing that somebody puts there because of remote work, then I think everything else just starts moving along, right? Because then you have lower latency and you have performance improvements once the applications are closer. So there's just a ton of gravity to the desktop. And it just, again, very exciting that it's now a legitimate way to deliver IT, as in the past, it was just kind of a niche thing to do that not many people were really that excited about. So I'm super pumped about it.
No, because I come from a Citrix background. I used to do mostly on-prem stuff. And when sort of DAS started kicking off probably 4 or 5 years ago, I was like, why would you want to do that? Because we spent so much time getting the on-prem environment right. Obviously, we used Citrix ICA protocols and stuff, and we had sort of everything inside the data center to make because Citrix, as the products, for example, was made to get everything in that data center, everything together, and the end user as close to that as possible, right? And then I sat there thinking, well, now we're doing the exact opposite. Because my data center's over here and the user's like 200 milliseconds away. But I think the difference is now, because technology's evolved so much, even if the user's 50 milliseconds away, the protocols have improved so much, right, that it doesn't matter anymore. 3-4 years ago, you'd know, but now you don't know, because that experience is so much better than it was previously. That's my personal opinion on it anyway.
Yep. Definitely. So, do we got any more questions, guys?
Not from my side. Everything's good.
Patrick, you said you had so many questions for the product.
I can generate. Okay, if it's like this, let's continue. Okay.
You said I have so many questions for you, but I said, okay, get ready.
One thing that could be very interesting for maybe the listeners as well is you're probably following the Ignite as well, like we do currently. And when you hear the new features are coming for WVD, how fast or how fast does it, or how can I describe it best? How long does it take for you to invent new features when you hear, for example, that a new feature has been raised by Microsoft, which comes quite soon, which could be interesting for the Nerdio manager as well? Can you give us a little bit insights on how you pick up the interesting features for your product? And we know that that it's quite faster development itself, but a little bit more insights for the community.
Sure. I think a lot of the value we deliver is we try to stay as far ahead as we can of what's available currently in GA from Microsoft, and kind of bridge some of the add some enhancements that customers can find valuable. So I think our speed to market is key to our strategy of staying relevant and being able to deliver value continuously. So anytime we see a new feature from Microsoft being announced, even in preview phase, we start thinking about how valuable is it for customers for the WVD use case, right? Because again, it's not just WVD; it's all of Azure. So I'll give you an example. The virtual desktop optimization tool that Microsoft released, right? That script that turns off the calculator and all the other things to make your PC run faster. So like once that came out, like literally, I think maybe the day or the day after it was announced, it was added to the next release. It wasn't a very complicated thing to build, but because it's something that needs to run not on the image. They recommend running it on the session host post deployment. We actually built out an entire infrastructure and framework around doing all kinds of things post-deployment. So if you go into our latest release, there's a new tab called VM Deployment. You can set the time zone, you can set session time limits, you can set your, it will automatically, it can run any PowerShell commands you want. It can optionally run the virtual desktop optimization tool. In the future, it will automatically install your GPU drivers based on which instance you select. All of that kind of stuff, right? So really anything that a customer may need to do on a machine post-deployment, our goal is to say, well, why do you need to log into a VM and do it on a per session host basis, define it at the hostful level, and just let it be completely automated. So that's just an example, right? There's obviously other features like MSIX that are bigger and more complicated. So we start working on them, but it takes a little bit longer to release. And I think by the time Microsoft releases theirs into public preview, we'll have a lot of additional enhancements based on the usage of what we've currently released from the customers that are going to use it for the next 3-4 months. So we'll have some additional enhancements that will provide value beyond what's going to be in the portal natively. I think one other thing to note is, we have the advantage of being outside of the Azure portal. So even though we're so the way the tool works, it's an application inside a customer subscription, but it's not integrated directly into the Azure portal. So it's not bound by what the Azure portal architecture is all about. So we can get super creative about what customers need that Microsoft may not have as much flexibility because they're in the Azure portal. So you can't do anything you envision in the Azure portal because there's lots of other things that plug into it. We don't have that limitation. So we think very broadly about the problems that we can solve when it comes to WVD.
Perfect. And now that I have generated new questions, Vadim.
Oh boy, I opened the Pandora's box. I should have challenged you. I know, I caused it myself. Okay.
No, I'm some kind of a quiz master here in the round. No, joking. One last question when it comes to optimization, as it's a very, very interesting point for a lot of people here in the community. And you already mentioned that there are some optimizations which probably don't, or which are not very helpful, like the removing of the calculator, disabling the Windows Update service. You said that the optimization tool is integrated into the Nerdio Manager for WVD. Do you change something in the way the optimizer is running?
In the current version, we will literally pull the exact version based on the OS, right? There's a 1909, there's a 2004 version. We pull it right from GitHub or whatever it's hosted. But you wouldn't be the first person to ask, like, can I customize it and not have to go into PowerShell? And that's something we're looking into to give people more granularity. What we wanted to launch with was something that was out of the box the way Microsoft published it, but we are getting feedback that people want more control and won't be able to customize it. So I think that's something you'll see coming.
Perfect. And I think it will be very interesting for the community as well. Something I wanted to mention here as well is the user groups. And we see that there's a big or a very large interest in the Nerdio Manager here. And for that reason, I invited Bas for the next October meetup. So we will have a special Ignite edition on the German WVD user group here. And we are planning to do a lot of demonstrations. So everybody who's listening, actually, the session will be in English. So feel free to join here. A little bit of advertisement here. But yeah, if you want to see the product in use and how to configure it and how to see what you can do with the Nerdio Manager for WVD, feel free to join here.
Great.
Awesome.
This was fun. Thanks for having me. This is really I really enjoyed this.
Good.
It was a pleasure having you, Vadim.
Thanks, guys, and thank you for everything you do for the community. Like I said, I anxiously wait for Sunday morning my time to see what you post. Sometimes you're late. That's all right. And I generally listen to the recordings. I go for a run, and I like to listen to whatever is on Sunday and learn from others in the community. It's always very informative, and just getting to know people more on a personal level, their personal backgrounds has been super interesting to me. So thanks for everything that you do. I know this is a lot of work. putting it all together, and I'm sure that others in the community appreciate it very much.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
And you'd be glad to know, so as you may realize, we didn't release a podcast episode on Sunday because we're waiting for you. So you're our special edition.
All right. Special edition. Sounds good.
Yeah. And just as well for our listeners, it's the Microsoft Meet event soon, which is the 28th of September.
The 30th.
30th, sorry.
September the 30th.
30th of September. Where myself and Stefan will be producing a session on some WVD best practices. So make sure you sign up for that. You don't have the link for it, but you can just search for Microsoft Meets Community, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And yeah, looking forward to that.
Definitely.
Okay. Cool. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Good.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.